Millionaire discovers his maid's heartbreaking secret after she mysteriously vanishes. Hey, beautiful souls, your support absolutely lights up my world. Hit subscribe to join our growing family and help me share more heartwarming stories with you. Here's my promise. I personally reply to every comment because I genuinely love connecting with each of you. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's dive into today's extraordinary tale together. The grandfather clock in the corner marked another restless hour as Ethan Blackwood sat motionless in his leather chair, the burgundy upholstery worn smooth by countless nights of solitary vigil. Rain hammered against the tall windows of his library, each droplet catching the amber glow of the desk lamp before sliding into darkness. The storm outside mirrored the tempest within him, all sound and fury, yet ultimately empty. His fingers trembled as they traced the edges of a faded photograph. 5-year-old Ethan beamed between his parents, their faces radiant with the kind of joy he could barely remember feeling. His mother's laugh had once filled these very halls before cancer silenced it forever. His father had retreated into work afterward, building an empire, while his son learned to navigate the labyrinth of loneliness that wealth could construct. Now, at 38, Ethan commanded boardrooms and bent markets to his will, yet he sat surrounded by the detritus of success. Leather-bound books that remained unread, ancestral portraits whose subjects felt more like strangers than family, and the oppressive silence that money could never quite fill. A tear escaped, startling him with its warmth against his cold cheek. He had trained himself long ago not to cry, believing tears were a luxury he couldn't afford in his ruthless ascent to power. The soft whisper of footsteps on marble broke through his reverie. His spine straightened, muscles tensing. The staff knew better than to disturb him during these midnight retreats. "Who's there?" His voice echoed through the cavernous room, carrying both authority and an edge of desperation he hadn't intended to reveal. From the shadows between the towering bookshelves emerged Clara Miller, the maid who had moved through his home like a ghost for 2 years. In her simple black uniform, she appeared almost ethereal in the lamplight, her dark hair pulled back severely, revealing a face marked by quiet suffering. Her eyes, deep brown and unexpectedly intelligent, met his with a mixture of fear and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Forgive me, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, musical in its softness. "I didn't know you were here. I came to borrow a book." Ethan found himself studying her as if seeing her for the first time. There was something about the way she held herself, proud despite her circumstances, dignified even in her obvious discomfort at being discovered. She clutched a worn volume against her chest like a shield. "A book?" he asked, genuine curiosity replacing his initial irritation. "At this hour?" Clara's gaze dropped to the Persian rug beneath her feet. "Tonight marks the anniversary of my father's death," she admitted. "I find that reading helps quiet the memories." The simple honesty in her words struck him like a physical blow. Here was someone else haunted by ghosts, someone who understood the weight of carrying the dead in your heart. For a moment, the vast library felt smaller, more intimate, as if her confession had drawn them into a shared cocoon of grief. "What do you read?" he asked, his voice gentler now. She hesitated, then extended the book toward Stories of Resilience, about people who had nothing yet found ways to live with joy. Ethan accepted the volume, his fingers brushing hers briefly. The book was ancient, its spine cracked from countless readings, pages yellowed with age and devotion. He opened it randomly, reading a passage about a fisherman who sang to the waves each morning, grateful for another day despite having lost everything in a storm. The words seemed to mock his own existence. He who had everything, yet felt grateful for nothing. "My father was a fisherman," Clara said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "He used to tell me that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in the moments we share." The simple wisdom hit him harder than any business rival's cruelest betrayal. He looked up to find her watching him with those remarkable eyes, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt truly seen, not as a millionaire or a mogul, but as a man carrying his own invisible wounds. They talked until dawn painted the windows pale gold, sharing fragments of their lives like precious artifacts. Clara spoke of her father's death at sea, of her mother's subsequent illness, of working multiple jobs to support her younger sister's education. Ethan found himself admitting to betrayals that had shaped him, to loves that had been calculated moves in elaborate games of power and influence, to the crushing loneliness that no amount of success could cure. As the first light of morning crept across the library floor, Clara rose to leave, but something in her expression gave Ethan pause. A shadow had crossed her features, a secret darkness she hadn't shared despite their hours of confession. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself manufacturing excuses to encounter Clara throughout his daily routine. He lingered in the kitchen longer than necessary, claimed to need files from rooms she was cleaning, and wandered the halls at odd hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of her quiet grace. The mansion, which had felt like an elegant mausoleum for so long, seemed somehow warmer when she was near. One evening, drawn by the faint sound of music, he discovered her in the staff quarters mending clothing by lamplight. A small radio played ancient melodies that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. She looked up, startled by his presence, but offering a gentle smile that transformed her entire face. "You shouldn't be here, sir," she whispered, but there was no real reproach in her voice. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, watching her nimble fingers work with practiced efficiency. "Maybe this is where I should have been all along," he replied quietly. Something flickered in her eyes, hope, perhaps, or fear. She lowered her gaze, hiding emotions too dangerous to reveal. In that moment, Ethan sensed the invisible scars she carried, the burden of secrets pressed tight against her heart. He wanted to demand answers, to understand why someone so genuine always looked as if she were bracing for an inevitable blow. But before he could speak, she excused herself politely and slipped away, leaving him with questions that multiplied like shadows at dusk. The following week brought a silence more deafening than any storm. Clara simply vanished, leaving behind only a formal request for 8 months' leave with no explanation, no forwarding address, no trace of the woman who had somehow become the center of his increasingly narrow world. Ethan threw himself into work with desperate fury, signing contracts and closing deals with mechanical precision, but every success felt hollow. He haunted the places where they had talked, the thought library at midnight, the garden bench where she had shared stories of resilience, the staff quarters where music still seemed to linger in the air. He even retrieved her worn book of stories, reading each tale as if it contained clues to her disappearance. Months crawled by with agonizing slowness. Other women had left his life before. Lovers who had wanted his money more than his company, business partners who had betrayed him for better offers, but none of their departures had carved such a void in his chest. Clara's absence wasn't just emptiness, it was a presence unto itself, a constant reminder of what he had lost before he had fully understood its value. Then, on a night when storm clouds gathered like dark omens outside his library windows, the phone rang. Mr. Blackwood. The voice was so weak he almost didn't recognize it, but something in its cadence made his heart stop. Clara. Her name escaped his lips like a prayer. "Where are you? Why did you leave without saying a word?" The pause that followed contained entire conversations of unspoken truth. When she finally answered, her words arrived fragmented, carried on labored breaths that suggested machinery humming in the background. "I didn't want you to see me like this." "Like what?" Desperation sharpened his voice to a blade's edge. "I'm unwell," she admitted, the confession seeming to drain what little strength remained in her voice. "I thought if I disappeared, it would be easier for you to forget me. I couldn't bear the thought of you pitying me, or worse, resenting me for the burden I'd become." The revelation hit him like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. This woman who had reminded him what it meant to be human was fighting a battle she had hidden from him completely, protecting him from her pain even as it consumed her. "Tell me where you are," he said, his voice carrying an authority born not of wealth, but of absolute certainty. "I don't care about the money, the empire, or any of it. I just need to see you." After another eternal pause, she whispered the name of a small hospital far from the city. The line went dead, leaving Ethan trembling with an urgency he had never felt for any business deal or financial conquest. He drove through the storm like a man possessed. rain lashing his windshield as if trying to turn him back. Every mile felt like a battle against time itself, every second a potential loss too great to calculate. The thought of Clara lying alone in some sterile room while he had spent months wallowing in self-pity tore at him with claws sharper than any professional failure. The countryside hospital was small and dimly lit, smelling of disinfectant and quiet suffering. His footsteps echoed down a corridor that seemed to stretch forever until he reached the room number she had given him. There she was, pale as winter moonlight, her once bright eyes dimmed by pain and medication, but still possessing that ineffable quality that had first drawn him to her. When she saw him, tears she had been too proud to shed alone began flowing freely. "You came," she whispered, wonder and disbelief warring in her voice. Ethan approached slowly, as if sudden movement might shatter this fragile moment. He took her hand gently, marveling at how small it felt in his, how delicate yet strong. "Of course I came. You disappeared and took half my soul with you," he confessed, his voice breaking on truths he had never dared speak aloud. Clara's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I didn't want to be your burden." "You are not my burden, Clara," he said, tears sliding down his face for the first time since childhood. "You are the reason I still believe in something beyond wealth and emptiness. You are the only real thing in my life." As he spoke, the storm outside seemed to quiet, as if the universe itself were listening to this moment of absolute truth. For the first time, Ethan understood the kind of wealth Clara's father had spoken of, the richness of genuine connection, of love that asked for nothing but gave everything, of moments that no amount of money could purchase or preserve. Holding her hand in the antiseptic quiet of that small hospital room, he made a vow more binding than any contract he had ever signed. He would fight for her, stand beside her, and never again let fear or silence steal away what truly mattered. The mansion, his empire, all the markers of success he had accumulated, they seemed insignificant compared to this fragile, unbreakable bond they had forged in the darkness. Whatever time they had left, he would make it count. Because in Clara's eyes, despite their current dimness, he had finally found the home he had been searching for all his life. The emptiness that had haunted him for so long began to fill with something money could never buy. The knowledge that he was no longer alone, and that sometimes the greatest wealth comes not from what we build, but from whom we choose to build it with.